Welcome to everybody to the area of medieval philosophy, which is considered as the one of the bridge between classical Western philosophy and the modern Western philosophy. In this area, we shall discuss about the characteristics of medieval philosophy. Middle Ages as the period marked from the year 395 AD, when the death of Theodosius, to the year 1453, when Constantinople was taken by the Turks. This is the period in which the new Christian religion established itself, both as a doctrine and as an institution. The philosophy of West during this period is dominated by Christian religion. So, our study of philosophy of the Middle Age will be concerned almost exclusively with the philosophy of Christianity as associated with the Church of Rome. In order to make clear the presuppositions and development of medieval philosophy, we should start with the Patristic period as an introduction. The Patristic period. The Patristic period was extended from the time of Christ to the death of St. Augustine in 430 AD. The Patristic period, which results from the fusion of early Christian religion with Hellenistic philosophy, is much richer in theology rather than philosophy. St. Augustine is the only figure who fully deserves the title of philosopher of this period. In 328, Athanasius, the episcopate of Alexandria, set the stage for St. Augustine's formulation of a truly Christian philosophy, which made use of Hellenistic and classical Greek phraseology without being subservient to it. Patristic philosophy reached its climax in the system of Augustine, which was the last great product of classical Christian civilization. Patristic philosophy, which combined Christian elements with those derived from the Greco-Roman philosophical tradition, provided materials of the medieval synthesis achieved during the Scholastic period. The Scholastic period. After the establishment of Christianity as an organized church, there began a period of philosophical construction devoted to the elaboration of a philosophy based on Christian dogma. This Christian philosophy dominated the philosophy of Middle Ages. The thinkers who performed Christian philosophy were called schoolmen, and their systems known as scholastic philosophy. The meaning of scholasticism. Scholasticism was applied in the time of Carloman to the teachings at the schools he established. A man designated as scholasticus might be supposed to be learned in the trivium, which means grammar, dialectic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium means arithmetic, geography, music, astronomy, or in theology. Characteristics of scholasticism. The purpose of scholasticism determines its method in so far as it consists in the development of proposition already accepted. It will largely employ deduction. The nature of these propositions and the need of proving them account for several other characteristics of scholastic philosophy. The chief concern of the schoolman is the transcendent world, the world of God, the angels, the saints. His thought is fixed not so much on phenomenal things as on the invisible realm of spirits. This accounts for the paramount importance of theology for scholasticism and the relative unimportance of the natural sciences. Stages of scholasticism. Scholasticism can distinguish in three principal phases. First one is formative period, the second is period of culmination, the third and the last is the period of decline. The formative period, beginning with the 19th and ending with the 12th century, is largely influenced by Platonic conceptions. Platonism, Neoplatonism and Augustinism are the dominant philosophical tendencies of this phase. Ideas or universals are conceived in Platonic terms as the real essence of things and as prior to things. This is the theory of Platonic realism, of which Aslam is the leading exponent. Then the second, the period of culmination of scholasticism. The 13th century witnessed the dominance of Aristotle's philosophy. Christianity allies itself the Greek thinker. Universals are now conceived as real, not however as prior to things, but in them. This teaching is called Aristotelian realism. The 13th century is the period of comprehensive systems. The leading thinkers of the period are Albert and the great St. Thomas Aquinas. Then the third one, the period of decline of the scholasticism followed in the 14th century. Universals are now regarded not as the essence of things, but as mere conceptions in the mind or as mere words or names. Particular things alone are real. Universals are real only in the mind and are hence after things. This is nominalism. John Duns Scotus and William of Ockham are the leading exponents of nominalism. Then we will discuss about the core concepts of scholasticism. First one, the relation between faith and reason. Second, the relation between the will and intellect. Then the third, the distinction between nature and grace. The fourth one, the status of the universals. Then faith and reason. In the period prior to St. Thomas, reason was secondary to faith and had as its main purpose the rationalization of revealed truth. Most thinkers of the period felt that reason is quite competent to perform this function. Indeed, some of the, for example, Rosalind of Copenhagen and Albert carry this confidence is reason to a point where reason often seems to run counter to and to correct faith. For St. Thomas Aquinas, faith is a gift from the Creator, perfecting a finite nature which without it would be reduced. Man's finite nature has a supernatural end, a beatitude consisting of love and direct knowledge of God. To such supernatural, man's nature can never attain it without assistance. The continuity of faith and reason, grace and nature is central to the thought of St. Thomas. St. Thomas insists throughout on the importance and the penetration of the intellect in its own sphere. When that penetration is helped by faith, there are only few things to which reason cannot attain. For example, an adequate understanding of the Trinity. In the period after St. Thomas, there were fewer dispositions to trust reason as a worthy auxiliary to faith, and thus revealed theology and faith became quite distinct from reason. Relation of will and intellect. We find echoes of the faith with reason controversy when we turn to the related question of whether the higher of the principle of faculties of the soul is the will or the intellect. The Middle Ages thought of faith as primary engaging the will, whereas reasoning by definition engaged the intellect. The basic question at issue is whether the will is absolutely self-determining or whether the will is itself determined by knowledge of the good. The lines of controversy are clearly drawn between Augustinians, including Scotus and Ockham, as advocates of the will, and Aristotelians, notably St. Thomas, as advocates of the intellect. This division in the late Middle Ages often coincides with the division between Franciscans and the Dominicans. The problem of universals. Throughout the medieval period, three types of approaches can be seen in the heading of the problem of universals. First one, realism, is the view that genera and species have a real subsistence independent both the mind that entertain them and the world of individuals that may be presumed to exemplify them. In this extreme form, this doctrine is combined with a derogation of the world of sense and the ascription to genera and species of a transcendent status that we may loosely designate as Platonic. The second one, at the other pole, is nominalism, with its formula that only the individual is real, construed in so strict a way as to imply that so-called genera and species are simply names by means of which we designate resembling individuals. The third one, mediating between nominalism and realism, is a third position, which depends for its formulation on the Aristotelian analysis of individual substance into components of form and matter. This position is designated by its advocates as a moderate or Aristotelian realism. St. Augustine, theory of knowledge. St. Augustine was the greatest constructive thinker and most influential teacher of the early Christian church. Aurelius Augustinus was born in Tagaste, North Africa in 353 AD. He became a teacher of rhetoric, first in his native city, and devoted himself to a study of theological and philosophical questions. In 396, he was raised to the bishop of Hippo in Africa, which he held until his death in 430. Devoting his great gift to the development and propagation of Catholic doctrine. Augustine achieved a philosophy which, although not thoroughly systematic, touches on all basic philosophical problems. He was greatly indebted to classicism and availed himself of classical terminology, sometimes Platonic, sometimes Aristotelian. At the heart of his philosophy is the doctrine of Trinity, which in his monumental work on the Trinity, he treats as the inexhaustible principle accepted on faith, which sheds intelligibility on the whole of reality. Theory of knowledge. St. Augustine had a view that the only knowledge having worth is the knowledge of God and self. All other knowledge, such as science of logic, metaphysics and ethics, has value only in so far as it contributes to the knowledge of God. It is our duty to understand what we firmly believe to see the rational basis of our faith. Understand in order to that you may believe, believe in order that you may understand. Some things we do not believe unless we understand them. Others we do not understand unless we believe. Intelligence is needed for understanding what faith believes, faith for believing what intelligence understands. The function of this pursuit is insight or wisdom sapientia, the highest function of reason when it is directed towards the creative principle. All intelligibility, including that attainable by the scientific intelligence scientia, depends on this divine creative principle. The ratio scientia seeks to find the elements or principles of nature by an analysis of what is given from the outside. On the other hand, the ratio sapientia turns inward, finding there both God and soul. Just as the one God is thought of as a trinity of existence, order and motion, so the substantial unity of the soul, a reflection of the trinity, exhibits existence, knowledge and will. To find the one is therefore to find the other also. The self, which Augustine finds and of which he thinks he achieves knowledge more reliable than that which he has external nature, is both a product and an aid towards the search for God, which he undertakes under the stimulus of the doctrine of Trinity. Furthermore, the self has intelligibility similar to that of Trinity. Justification or explanation of the self or soul is not, therefore, to be found in the world of nature. Augustinian's dictum, "Believe in order that you may understand," differ both from Tertullian rejection of reason and from the extreme dualism which oppose faith and reason. Reason must first decide whether a revelation has actually occurred. When it has been decided that revelation is authentic, faith affirms it and reason seeks to understand and interpret it. We cannot, however, expect to understand everything we believe, but must be prepared to accept the truths of faith solely on the authority of the Church, which is the representative of God on earth. Augustine conceives truth after the Platonic fashion as having real existence and regards the knowledge of it as native to the human mind. Sometimes he speaks as if the mind of man literally induced the divine ideas. At other times he says that God created them in us. In either case, truth is objective, not a mere subjective product of the human mind. It is independent and clear whether you and I apprehended it or not. It exists and has always existed. The source of this eternal and changeless world of truth is God. St. Anselm. Anselm, Archbishop of Canterbury, opposed the nominalistic theories. He is a true type of schoolman. He seeks to prove faith by reason, what has to be accepted on authority. In his attempt to rationalize the faith, he includes in his theology not only such general propositions as the assertion of the existence of God, but the entire church doctrine of salvation, the Trinity, the incarnation and the redemption of man. Proof for the existence of God. Anselm put forward two types of arguments as the proof for the existence of God. One is cosmological and the other is ontological arguments. Cosmological argument. In his work Monologium, he employs the cosmological argument. Anselm takes his cosmological argument from St. Augustine. According to him, God is the perfect cause for everything. Things from a graduated scale of excellence, there must be highest form or degree of perfection to complete this series of more or less perfect objects. And everything is caused by the first cause. The first cause must be the most perfect cause, the most perfect being, the cause of all perfect things in the universe. Second one, the ontological argument. In his work Prosologium, he offers the ontological proof for the existence of God. His ontological argument has a strong base on Platonic realism. His so-called ontological proof marks his name in the history of thought. This proof consists in his deducing the existence of God from the concept of God, in showing that the very idea of God implies his existence. The idea of God is the notion of something greater than which nothing can be thought, that is the idea of the perfect being. Now, if God does not exist, this idea would not be the idea of the greatest thing thinkable. There would be something greater still. The idea of being having existence in the more perfect being than the idea of one having no existence. Hence, God is the most perfect being, must exist. In this way, Islam seeks to prove that the perfection of God implies his existence. The conclusion, however, does not necessarily follow from Islam's premises. His reasoning proves no more than that we think of a being as existing. We are thinking of a being that is more perfect than a non-existent being. The notion of an existing being is the notion of a being that has more qualities than a being conceived as not existing. He does not prove that God exists, but merely that the idea of an existing God connotes more than the mere subjective idea of God. No doubt, the idea of God includes the idea of existence, but it does not follow from the notion of a perfect being, a notion which carries with the idea of existence that such a being actually exists. It should be noted, however, that the ontological argument will seem strong to anyone accepting the realistic presupposition that universals have an extra mental reality. The realistic theory of universals acted as the base of the ontological argument for the existence of God. Criticism. The fallacy in Islam's ontological argument was exposed by the monk Galileo in his book Against the Reasoning in Islam's Prosologium. The being of God in the mind, he declares, is the same as the being of any other thing in the mind, that is, so far as it is thought. In the same way in which Islam proves the existence of God, one might prove the existence of a perfect island. Defining it as the most perfect island which can be convinced, it follows by the Islamian logic that as perfect island exists. Now we shall summarize in the session. This unit exposed the fundamental aspects of medieval philosophy thoroughly. The first module gives a detailed analysis of the emergence of medieval philosophy and shows the importance of scholasticism in the history of philosophy. It also makes a clear idea about the prominent thinkers of that period and analyze the key concepts of medieval thought. The first module also describes the period of scholasticism. The second module marks the St. Augustine's contribution to scholasticism. The module elaborates St. Augustine's theory of knowledge. The third module describes the proofs for the existence of God advocated by St. Islam. The module also discussed the criticism of the same. Before we attend the next session, please try to answer the following questions. First one, write a note on the key concepts of medieval philosophy. Summarize St. Augustine's theory of knowledge. Third one, describe the periods of scholasticism. Fourth one, evaluate Islam's ontological proof for the existence of God. Fifth one, discuss the problem of universals. Book for your reference: A History of Philosophy, Frank Tilly; Story of Western Philosophy, Will Durant; History of Western Philosophy by Frederick J. Copleston. Thank you for watching this session. Now I think that you are enriched with medieval philosophy. See you next time. Until then, goodbye.